Good morning. Many years ago, when I was a kid, back in the 1960s, it was the time of bands were beginning, or groups as we called them then. So the Beatles became popular, and the Rolling Stones and the Kinks and others. Well, around near where I lived in Acton in West London, there was a group of lads who, I think they had a minivan or something. And on this minivan, they were in a band and they'd written the name The Detours. Have you ever heard of the Detours? Shouldn't think so. And I don't think anybody had. A rumour had it locally that they'd go around and say, we're the Detours. And people would say, the who? And in the end, they changed their name to The Who. Now, I've looked on Wikipedia and that there are other versions as to how they got their name. But the reason why I'm talking about The Who is that one of their most famous songs was called Talking About My Generation. People try to put us down, talking about my generation. And I've been thinking about the generations over these last few days, partly because the generations seem to be blaming one another. Some older people are saying it's those young people that are spreading COVID, they're not sticking to the rules, you know. And then I think some young people are fed up that they almost feel they've got to sacrifice their freedom and their youth and and all they want to do for older people. And I think it's really important that older people and younger people can learn from one another, can respect one another. Back in the 1960s, it was actually in 1964, in bank holidays then, a lot of young people then would go to the seaside resorts, places like Margate and Southend, and even down here to Bournemouth. And there were problems between two groups of young people, the mods and the rockers. And there was lots of violence, and a lot of older people thought, what is the world coming to? The war was only, 19 years before, and people said, we fought in the war for the likes of you, and now you're ruining everything. And it made me think that if some of those young people were about 18 in 1964, that means they were born in 1946. That means they're 74 now. They're in their mid-70s. And I wonder how they look back on those days. And I wonder if some of them are criticising young people today. In a way, I think the generation gap has been less than it was when I was a kid. I remember the music that my dad liked. He would hugely criticise all the pop music, and if he got his chance, he'd listen to Jeanette MacDonald and Nelson Eddy, and that used to drive me crazy as well. Yeah, I know that these days there's young people who really like the Beatles and really like Bob Dylan and people like that. And so I'm keen that generations work together in society and in the church. In Psalm 90, it says this: Lord, you have been our dwelling place throughout all generations, before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the earth and the world. From everlasting to everlasting, you are God. If God is who we say he is, he's from before any generation came, and he's seen through every generation and will continue to do so. Every generation faces its own challenges. I'm so pleased I'm not a young person during this pandemic with all the restrictions that it's bringing. The same psalm then goes on to talk about the length of our days. It says, the length of our days is 70 years or 80 if we have the strength. And then he goes on to say, yet their span is trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. Our generation, the older generation, will pass, and we need to pass the baton on so that the younger people can run with good things. As I say, I think that's true throughout the whole country. I think it's true in the churches as well. There's a book called Zechariah, which is at the end of the Old Testament. And there's a verse in there, Zechariah 8:4, and it's a vision of the future. And the writer says, once again, men and women of ripe old age will sit in the streets of Jerusalem, each with cane in hand because of old age. The city streets will be filled with boys and girls playing there. I think that's a wonderful vision of old and young working together. Someone once said they want their church to be a good place to grow up in and a good place to grow old in. Talking of which, and finishing off with The Who again and My Generation, perhaps the most famous line in that is a line that says, I hope I die before I get old, talking about my generation. And I used to think that meant, well, they didn't want to live long, but I don't think it is that. I think it's more, may in our attitudes we remain young and flexible, open to new things, and not just criticising new things, new ways of thinking when they come. Hope I die before I get old. Take care. Have a great week. Bye-bye.